As I drive across the manicured lawns and past the majestic monuments, the first thought that comes to mind is how similar this cemetery is to the golf club in our city. Of course, the golf club is 3 miles in the opposite direction, but they may have been designed by the same person. How strange it is to be here again, in the city where I grew up and lived most of my life, for the first time in 8 years. I always thought that I would live here all my life and eventually die here, but that was not meant to be. Probably the strangest thing about coming back here is the circumstances. I came back here for the funeral of a man who was like a brother to me for most of my life. When we were kids, there were 4 of us. We were called musketeers because we were always together, and the rule, one for all and all for one, was valid for us, like the musketeers. If someone tried to hurt us, they had to deal with all of us. Now, of the 4 of us, I was the only one left who was not crippled or dead. This is truly amazing considering that we are all the same age and none of us are under 40. I probably wouldn't have come to that funeral if Jeff's mother hadn't gotten my number from mutual friends and begged me to come and say a few words. I'm not sure what it will be like to meet some of my old friends and people I knew when I lived here. I doubt how they will treat me. All my doubts disappear when a hand touches mine on the gear shift. I take my eyes off the road for a moment and see a smile appear on my wife's face. Her smile is contagious, and I can't help mine. Feels strange coming home after all these years, doesn't it? I ask. She nods and smiles again. Before she can put her thoughts into words, we both hear the wisdom of the ages from the small back seat of my Mustang. This is not a house, Dad. This is some other place. But there is beautiful grass here. Can I play on this grass? Asks my 5-year-old daughter. I park behind the line of cars and see that although we arrived early, there are already several people here. It's strange, but you expect there to be a lot more people here. After all, Jeff has lived here his whole life. You'd think everyone would come to say goodbye to him. Since Jeff started out as a doctor, you would expect there would be a lot of people here to acknowledge all the good he did. But his last years were probably not associated with medical practice. I wonder what he did after he got out of prison. I get out of the car and walk around to open the door for my wife Amanda and my daughter Amy. I feel a slight tingling on the back of my neck as my hair stands on end. I look up and notice that most of the people in the small crowd are looking at us. Amanda grew up here too. She just left town right after her first 2 years of college. Our marriage, in a sense, is the second for both of us. We both take Amy's hands and walk towards the crowd. As I approach the crowd, Reverend Brady begins to introduce me. It almost seems like they were waiting for me. I walk up to the small podium they've built for Jeff's funeral and start talking. I'm talking about the tragedy of losing life. What I'm talking about is holding on to the ones you love because we never know when they will be taken from us. I talk about the value of living a full life because, again, we never know how much we have. I then walk off the podium to generous applause, a few puzzled faces, and a couple of open-mouthed faces. The 2 who seem shocked are the people I know best. One of them, Bert, is the only one of the musketeers, besides me, who is still alive. He leans heavily on a cane, and one of his legs is badly twisted. The hand holding the cane appears larger than the other. His left arm has almost no function, and the muscles have atrophied. He also has difficulty breathing. I know, of course, that this is due to several broken ribs, and therefore his chest cannot expand and contract fully. He looks at me, and it is difficult for me to understand the emotions behind his gaze. The other person who seems shocked is a woman. She looks much older than she should, especially considering we're the same age. Her complexion and gaze suggest a long history of alcohol abuse. Her mouth is open, and she looks at me as if she is begging me to notice her. She is slightly bent at the waist, and her skin is ruddy. She is thicker than I remember her in the torso, but her limbs seem thin. She looks at me, trying to decide whether to approach me or not, and then 2 women appear in my life. Amanda steps between me and the other woman, as if to tell her that to get to me, she will have to go through her first. Then my daughter's voice comes in, with the volume that only 5-year-olds have. Dad, is this a witch? She's an evil witch like in my books. She looks like a witch." Another voice, this time much older and still filled with love, comes from the other side. "Liam, you spoke so well," she says. "I look and see it's Jeff's mom. You're not leaving so soon, are you? After the ceremony, we'll have a get-together at the house. You haven't been in town since you left. Don't you want to say goodbye to Jeff before they—" I can't say this. She begins to cry. I embrace the woman who, besides my own mother, raised me the most. I hug her, squeezing gently to let her know that I am here with her and that I feel her pain. Her husband, who is also very upset, comes over to replace me. Another woman, young, looks me straight in the eye. "Well played, Liam," she grins. "I noticed, if no one else noticed, how you played. Your words were very beautiful and inspiring, but they were also very general. You didn't say one damn word about Jeff himself, did you?" That didn't sound at all like the words of someone who was close to Jeff like a brother. You grew up together and took care of each other for most of your lives. I expected something more personal, unless— "If only what?" I asked. "Paula was Jeff's ex-wife and the mother of his 2 children. Unless you hated him as much as I did," she chuckled. "But it doesn't matter. It seems like everything worked out well for you in the end, and it ended the way it should have from the beginning." She waved at Amanda and turned to leave. Before she left, she threw one last jab over her shoulder. "No matter what his mom says, don't go look at the body. He looks nothing like his old self. His life has been hell for the last 8 years, and that's what he looks like. And if you're anything like me, you won't be able to resist the temptation to spit on his face, because he deserves it." Paula's speech gave Bert time to get to me. "Liam," he croaks, "you look good." I give him a curt nod. "How long will you be in town?" he is asking. "Not for long," I answered. "Do you think I can talk to you before you leave? There is something that I need to get off my chest, and there probably won't be another opportunity. You will no doubt be the last of the musketeers to survive. If you come again in 8 years, I will no longer be there." He said, "I'm going to take Mandy and my daughter to my parents," I say. "They haven't seen her since they came to Chicago for Christmas. Where do you want to meet?" "At Mulligan's," he said. "Thank you." I simply nodded again. The woman, whom my daughter mistook for a witch, listened to the entire conversation. She turned to leave, giving me another long look. I'm sure she will be there too. She'll probably also want to tell me something without Amanda there. I return to my wife and child and head back to my Mustang. I'm denying myself the chance to say goodbye to Jeff and, as his ex-wife said, the chance to release any fluids onto his body. Less than an hour later, I'm sitting at the table at Mulligan's that we always sat at when we went out with friends. Old man Mulligan still runs the place, although his sons seem to have taken over. He tells me that out of the 4 of us, I'm the only one who hasn't changed, and I smile. As I wait for Bert to join me, I remember the events of 8 years ago, when our lifelong friendship ended, and with it my innocence. In fact, I remember it like it was yesterday. Even though I didn't seem to be affected much, it changed me on a fundamental level. I have been going to therapy for years. But honestly, it was Amanda who helped me get through it with my soul intact. Amanda ran away from her first husband, and we built our life together. Well, let's start with how it all fell apart. My name is William Bennett. I grew up with 3 friends in Dunbridge, Indiana. Dunbridge is a medium-sized town. We have most of the amenities of big cities. It just takes a little longer to get them. My 3 best friends, Jeff Martin, Bert Lincoln, and Greg Pruitt, owned the world. We were all married. We all had our own homes and great jobs or careers. Jeff was a doctor. Greg was a lawyer. Bert was a teacher, and I was an engineer. We all met regularly at parties and barbecues at each other's houses. Of course, the guys also played bowling, cards, and golf together. Bert was the best golfer among us. He won the country club tournament 4 times in a row. Everyone expected him to win again this year and tie the winning record. And next year he would set a new record. He was that good. Greg was the best among us at bowling, and Jeff was the best at card games. I wasn't really the best at anything we did together. My skills lay in other areas. I was an avid runner and completed 4 marathons, including the Boston Marathon. I was never going to win the marathon, but I was the only guy I knew who could run 26 miles. I also loved my Mustangs. Since the first car I ever bought, I have never driven another car. 2 of our wives were also from Dunbridge and grew up with us. Jeff's wife, Paula, was a couple of years younger than us at school, and we all watched her grow into the woman she became. Greg met his wife, Tina, in college, and she moved to Dunbridge after their wedding. Bert's wife, Elaine, did the same when he met her at a teacher's conference. My wife, Julie, grew up with us. She was sort of the unofficial fifth musketeer. It was quite strange how she and I ended up together. I didn't really know her until after college, although she was always around. After graduation, she started communicating with us more and became part of the company. I think we were just the last ones left after the others banded together. This forced us to spend more time with each other, and we eventually got married. Julie was the light of my life. Even though it wasn't love at first sight for her, I always loved her. I think it just took her longer to realize that she loved me. I dated another girl all through high school and college, but things started to go awry when it came time to choose a major and decide what we were going to do. Our career paths were simply incompatible. No matter how much I loved her, and no matter how much I hoped she loved me, I could not come to terms with her career choice and the lifestyle it suggested. There was simply no place for me in her life. So even though circumstances pushed Julie and I towards each other, we were determined to do it. We had a plan, and that's it. We made a schedule for all the important things in our lives, including when to start having children. We had almost reached this point when everything collapsed. I had a habit of doing my longest run of the week every Sunday morning. This was usually a 2 to 3 hour running challenge that set the tone for the week. So that Sunday, I was running around the park at a pace that was slow enough that I could keep it up for 20 miles or so when I came across the most incredible legs I've ever seen. They were slender but well built. The muscles on these legs were sculptured. Her thighs were amazing, with a slight gap between them at the top. The ass these legs were attached to was delicious. I forgot about my training schedule and pace just to watch that jiggly ass in front of me. That amazing ass tapered to a tiny waist and kept going. After a few shy glances over her shoulder, the woman suddenly stopped, and I ran into her. "Liam, this is not how I wanted us to meet again," she said, and changed my world. When I finally came to my senses, I realized that I knew her. I spent the rest of the morning talking to her. If I hadn't changed my schedule to talk to Amanda, my life would probably be very different. As it was, I came home earlier. Everything in Dunbridge is quite close, so I didn't drive to the park, I ran. I walked home and entered the house, ready to tell Julie about meeting my old friend. I wasn't prepared for what I heard. I entered through the kitchen because when I was sweating and dripping, Julie would make a fuss if I was in the living room. I was not allowed to go near her furniture unless I was absolutely clean. It didn't seem right given what I was seeing now. My wife had sex with Greg. Jeff and Bert stood to the side, probably waiting their turn. My heart sank to my feet. They were all naked, and it seemed like they had done this many times. I didn't know how to react. This was not something I expected. These 3 were closer to me than anyone else. We helped each other in every aspect of life. Jeff actually introduced me to Julie in the first place, and Julie loved me. I put my anger aside and took out my phone to take some pictures for the scam. Actually, we need to talk, Julie said. There will be time to talk later, Bert said. No, it's serious, Julie said. 3 guys sat on the sofa and began to listen to her. It seemed really strange that she didn't mind that they were sitting on the very couch I paid for, but I couldn't get anywhere near it. This is our last time, she said. It's time to stop. What the hell do you mean? Jeff asked. Liam got another promotion at work, Julie began. He won't be traveling anymore, and maybe it's time to think about having a baby. I also don't want to do this to him anymore. I've been thinking and... That's the problem, Jeff said sharply. You'll have to leave the thinking to those who are good at it. Liam won't be traveling, it just means we'll have to be more careful. It means we'll probably have to scrap the ending so one of us can keep an eye on Liam. I know you'll miss the three of us having sex, but sacrifices are inevitable. No, that's not all, she said. I don't want to do this to him anymore. It's wrong. Liam really loves me. It may not have started out the way we planned, but I think I'm starting to fall in love with him too. He's so kind and caring. He does everything for him. I have so many things, and my parents even love him. I think I want to see if we can. Well, you know. No, damn it, I don't, Jeff said scornfully. I was the one who convinced you to marry the idiot in the first place. You hated him. You only agreed because you didn't want to work. What did you say then? A couple of hours a week on your back is better than 40 hours a week at a desk. You called him a nerd. But after 6 years, everything changed with him, she said sharply. I just realized that out of all the guys I've ever met, he's the only one who really cares about me, and I'm not going to cheat on him anymore. I feel like a woman of easy virtue, she said. And you should, because that's what you are, Greg said. You are not cut out to be anyone's wife. Jeff's wife belongs to Jeff. My wife belongs to me, and Bertha's wife belongs to Bert. You are different. You are public property. You belong to all of us, so we share you. We even shared you with Liam. Liam was the only one of us you didn't sleep with in college. Since he got you last, he doesn't have the same rights as us. Yeah, and if you want to have a baby, go ahead, Bert said. I want it to be Liam's baby, she said. So until he gets me pregnant, no one else will get anything. Why don't you just sleep with your wives since they're so special? Let me guess, I'm the most beautiful girl, you know, smiled her. Oh, hell no, Greg said. The most beautiful girl we know is Liam's ex Amanda. She had all this blonde hair, this perfect slim body, and big blue eyes. Well, my breasts are better than hers, and didn't she become a nun? Julie said. Yeah, well, she broke Liam's heart by becoming a nun, Jeff said. From what I heard, she only had sex a couple of times before she went to a convent. And when it comes to breasts, my wife has the best in the city. Then why don't you sleep with her? Julie asked. Because she's a bitch, Jeff said. Paula acts like she's gold-plated. It's just not worth all the trouble. So this is my ass then? Julie asked. No, Bert said. My wife has the best ass in the state. Guys bump into everything when she walks down the street in a skirt or skinny jeans. Your ass isn't even close. Julie just looked at him. So I'm just the best for sex, huh? She asked. I'm just the one everyone wants to have sex with. No, not even that, Greg said. You're just the biggest prostitute. You'll let anyone sleep with you. It's always been like that. Hell, the only one who ever waited and met you before getting into your pants was Liam. Well, that all stops now, Julie said sharply. From now on, Liam will be the only one who gets into my pants, period. It would have been very painful for him, Jeff said. What do you mean? Julie asked. I mean, if you stop sleeping with us, I'll have to tell poor Liam all about this, Jeff said. He'll be heartbroken, and you two will probably get divorced. You're over 30, you don't have any skills, and you've never worked. The only thing you know is to have sex. What kind of life will you have? In time, he will forgive us for being weak and letting you talk us into having sex with you. But he will never forgive you. But it wasn't like that, said Julie. Who's he going to believe, bitch? Greg said. To your 3 lifelong best friends or to you? And don't worry about him catching us, Jeff said. I'll get you some pills. They're very powerful sleeping pills. I don't have trouble sleeping, Julie said. See, they're already working, Jeff said. But seriously, you idiot, the pills are for Liam. When we need to meet, just put one in his drink, and he'll sleep through the night. Now come here. Julie just looked at him. Bert, call Liam, Jeff said. Bert took out his phone. I left the house and knocked over the table by the back door. I ran across the yard and behind the garage as soon as I saw Julie's face in the doorway. A few minutes later, my phone rang. Hello, I said, as if I had just arrived. Liam, honey, when are you going to finish? Julie asked. I want to make you breakfast. It's not worth it, I said. I'll probably just want something light. I hung up. An hour later, I entered the house. My supposed friends were not there. Hi, honey, Julie said. As always, she seemed to care about me and everything that might be wrong. The difference was that now I knew it was all a lie. I just looked at her. I think deep down I wanted to see if there was any change in her. In fact, she looked exactly the same as always. The only difference was how I treated her. When she tried to sit me down and asked if I wanted her to massage my legs, I got goosebumps. No, thanks, I said. Well, how about you sit in the bath, and I'll give you a massage like always, she suggested. Actually, I think I'll just hit the spa for a while, I replied. Do you want me to join? She asked. I need to think, I said. It occurred to me while I was running. Maybe I should pass on the promotion. She looked startled. Why do you want to do this? She asked. We'll get more money and we won't have to be apart as much. Are you crazy? I wasn't crazy. I was shocked. I needed some time to figure out how I felt about all this, so I climbed into our little two-person spa and let the bubbles wash over me. I set the temperature to the hottest I could handle and just thought. I thought about my life, or the life I thought I had. I thought about my friends, or who I thought they were for me. Eventually, I realized that I was practically alone. Apart from my parents, who I didn't want to involve in this, I didn't have anyone I could really trust. Then I started thinking about what I would like my life to be like. I wanted to end my relationship with Julie. What hurt me the most was not that I saw her with my best friends, but that she never really loved me. I gave her my heart the entire time we were together. I still couldn't believe that she never cared about me. Of course, she claimed to care now, but that was probably just a result of living with me for so many years and all the things I did for her. Perhaps the most mature thing to do would be to divorce Julie and try to start your life over. While I was at the spa, I heard my phone ringing. I let it go to voicemail while I decided my fate. Julie. I was living in a nightmare. At 31, my life was taking a path I had not planned. I was married to the most wonderful man I knew. My plan completely failed. 9 years ago, when he and his friends graduated from college, I didn't really know Liam. Sure, he was attractive, probably the most attractive of the four, but he had spent the last 2 years of college depressed over his girlfriend's decision to join a monastery. I slept with the other 3 multiple times, but had very little contact with Liam. Jeff actually brought us together. I had known Jeff for a while, but when he met Paula, he couldn't date me anymore. Jeff was going to medical school, and others were already getting jobs in their specialties. Most of our friends were starting out in life, and I had no idea what I wanted to do. It seemed like I would be the last one left at the party. My mom once mentioned that her friend was opening a restaurant, and I might consider working for her. Then I knew that my mother was crazy. Did she really see me on my feet all day, running here and there, serving people? My real plan was to marry Jeff until he met Paula. I knew Jeff loved big breasts. Paula's breasts were simply amazing. I couldn't believe she could stand upright, let alone walk. One of the cool things about Jeff was that he and his friends shared everything. He introduced me to other guys and didn't mind if I slept with them as long as he got his share. Jeff and I had a pretty good relationship, and I could always talk to him, so I told him about my problem. It was he who suggested that I meet his friend Liam. I later learned that Jeff had several reasons for everything he did. On the one hand, he wanted Liam to get engaged too, like the other 3. They always did everything together, so he didn't want Liam to be a carefree bachelor while the others were tied up in marriage. He was also worried about Liam. It's been 2 years since Liam broke up with Amanda, and he hasn't dated anyone. And finally, its real reason. This was the first time I heard that Jeff had an idea for the public domain. I belonged to them all, and the only way any of them could use me after our wedding without arousing suspicion was if I was married to one of them. That way they could tell their wives they were going to Liam. If all 8 of us continued to communicate together, No one would suspect anything. I knew it was wrong from the start, but it made my life easier. Being a wife was much easier than being a waitress. Greg even told me that the smartest thing to do would be to stay with Liam for 5 or 6 years and then divorce him. After we've been married this long, there will be a different type of public domain. The type that meant I could get child support and half his income and still do nothing. It was a great plan. I thought about this before I called Liam on our second date. I will capture him with sex, and then, after a while, I will simply start denying him sex. So when the time comes for divorce, I will turn it off completely. If he doesn't get sex from me, he probably won't mind the divorce. The problem with the grand plan was Liam. He was the sweetest man I've ever met. We started out more as friends than anything else, but I soon noticed that I liked him. It took some time, but soon we became a couple. When we finally got married, I couldn't believe it. He really listened to me, and we talked about everything. We finally had sex on our honeymoon, and it was like nothing I'd ever experienced before. He was gentle and loving. Instead of forcing me to do what he liked, he asked me what made me happy. I've thought about this a lot. Even after we got married, Liam always gave me little gifts and flowers. Before I knew it, I actually started to have feelings for him. I couldn't call it love, but I really enjoyed being with him. Over time, I started doing things to try to please him, just like he did for me. I never stopped sleeping with other guys, even after I married Liam, but I didn't feel guilty about it back then. Over time, I noticed that I needed balance. For every time I had sex with other guys, I needed to spend time with Liam. The other guys had their merits. When it came time to divorce Liam 4 years ago, Greg asked if I wanted to start the paperwork. I told him it was probably best to wait and catch Liam doing something wrong. I knew he would never do this, but I just couldn't admit to anyone that I wanted to stay married to Liam. So in the last few years, everything has become better. Over the past 6 months, I have decided that I will remain married to Liam for the rest of my life. I recently decided that I wanted a child and that it should be Liam's. I was ready to give up extramarital sex forever and become a good wife. My goal was to throw a going-away party for the guys, tell them the bad news, and say goodbye to them. But that did not happen. Even as Liam walked through the door, I was contemplating other options when I noticed the look on his face. Something was wrong with him. At first, I thought he had pulled something or gotten injured while running. Then he started talking about turning down a promotion at work. I knew something was going on. I also had another idea that I wanted to discuss with the guys. Maybe we should stop this for a few weeks. That way I could stop taking the pills and let Liam get me pregnant. Liam, it all came down to one thing. The people I thought were my loved ones stole my life from me. Julie, Jeff, Bert, and Greg had to pay. I wasn't going to take this anymore. At 33, almost half of my life was wasted. They say that the average person lives about 70 years. This meant that almost half of my life was wasted on people who weren't worth it. Each of them had to pay. I had to decide exactly how and what I was going to do. This took me several days. The first thing I did was install a recorder on the home phone to get information about what they were doing. Since Julie was always at home, she did not have a mobile phone. It's been about a week since I caught them, and I haven't been idle. I met with several lawyers, and they all told me that divorcing Julie would likely mean that I would give her almost half of my assets. I didn't think she deserved it, so I was going to figure out something else for Julie, even if it meant I had to stay married to her for a while. I decided to start with Bert because he would be the easiest. Since Bert was the one who said the least against me personally, he will receive the lightest punishment. I started asking around the city in not-so-nice places to find out where you could go if you needed someone beat up. I was eventually directed to a couple of bars in a nearby town. A bartender in one of the bars put me in touch with a guy who said that for $500 plus $1,000 for the one who would do the beating, they would do the job. I started hanging out at this bar. I became friends with the bartender and told him I was looking for a job. We didn't exchange names, but after a week or so he trusted me and said that if something came up, he would give me a chance. A few days later, I asked another guy to contact the bartender to find someone to work with. I know it sounds confusing, but it was necessary. So I paid the bartender, who thought someone else had paid him, to pay me to beat Bert up myself. That way, if someone were to investigate, there would be enough layers between me and the crime that no one would be able to link me to it. I gave my friend all the information about Bertha. He handed it to the bartender and gave him the money. The bartender actually cheated me. He only gave me $750. A few nights later, I caught Bert leaving a bar he frequented. Bert wasn't drunk, so he had a chance. I put on my ski mask, and it was dark. It was a very fair fight. The next day, I received a call from Jeff. We had to go to the hospital to see Bert. "What about him?" I asked. "He got robbed," was all Jeff said. "Yeah, you're about to get robbed too, asshole," I thought. We all stood by his bed and watched as Bert tried to tell the detective about his attack. He told the detective that the guy attacked him out of nowhere and just beat him up. He was sure it was a case of mistaken identity because he had never done anything bad to anyone. He just came in for a drink after work. The guy didn't take anything and didn't try to steal his car. He didn't understand this. Maybe he was just in the wrong place at the wrong time. After the police left, Bert looked at us. I told the guys I needed to go call Julie and I'd be right back. When I left the room, I stuck the tip of my shoe into the door frame, leaving the door slightly open, and began to eavesdrop. "What didn't you want to talk about?" Jeff asked. Bert could barely speak through the pain. "There were two," he whispered. "There was someone who beat me up. He seemed to enjoy the beating. He kept offering me a bat and telling me I could hit him. I just wanted him to stop. They started talking, and I heard him say something, that they were hired by some brother of the girl I'm sleeping with." Both Greg and Jeff looked worried. "You sleep with at least two women besides your wife," Jeff said. "Which of them could it be?" "I think it's the new secretary," said Bert. "I met her brother once, and he didn't like me. I didn't tell the cops because if I did, my wife might find out, and that would definitely be the end of me." I chose that moment to return to the room. Jeff and Greg noticed me and simply nodded. "Do you know anything about who beat you?" I asked. Bert shook his head. "We can't let someone get away with this," I said angrily. "We are musketeers, one for all and all against all." "You mean one for all and all for one," Jeff corrected me. "You know what I meant," I snapped. "We need to find out who did this and make them pay for it. People need to understand that if they attack or offend any of us, there will be serious consequences." "Calm down, cowboy," Greg said. "We have no idea who did it or why. Like Bert said, it could be a case of mistaken identity." "Damn it," I snapped. "Someone has to pay. I feel like someone attacked me personally, and I want everyone involved to feel my pain, one way or another." They all looked at me strangely. "I'll see you on the golf course tomorrow." "Oh, hell, that's even worse," I said. "What do you mean?" Jeff asked. "Well," I said, "maybe there's another possibility. With all his injuries, Bert has no chance of ever breaking the record for most tournament wins in golf." I saw a single tear roll down Bert's cheek. Apparently, he forgot about his chance at inheritance. Internally, I was glad. While Greg and Jeff stayed at the hospital visiting Bert, I went about my business. I went to Jeff's clinic. I had a key to his place because every year when he went on vacation, I would pick up his mail and take delivery. Jeff didn't want his nurse or assistant to do this because they would charge for it. Jeff was very stingy. I went into the small back room where Jeff kept paper copies of original medical forms and other patient data. The room was cool and efficient, and despite the enormous amount of paper, there was minimal risk of fire. I had several cans of gasoline. I poured them into containers labeled rubbing alcohol and placed them in one corner and wiped down the walls and floor with gasoline. The room was well sealed, and Jeff's staff came in to add new files once a month. I had at least 2 or 3 weeks before anyone would come here. I returned to my car and picked up the iron with the defective plug. I found a printer with exposed wires and plugged them both into an extension cord and connected the extension cord to the timer. Jeff's office was closed on Sundays, so no one would be here tomorrow. I drew a trail of incendiary fluid from the extension cord to the canisters of alcohol and smiled. The timer was set for tomorrow morning while all three of us played golf. This was just the beginning of Jeff's problems. I smiled thinking about it. Of course, the police will think it was arson. As soon as I got into the car, I connected the voice changer from Radio Shack to the burner phone I bought at the gas station today. I called Jeff's office in a loud and angry voice. "What kind of fucking doctor are you?" I shouted. The voice-changing software made it deeper and almost alien. "I sent my boyfriend to set fire to your office as you asked, but you didn't pay. I've never seen such a greedy doctor. If I don't have money tomorrow, I'll set fire to your house with you." I took the battery out of the phone and threw it down the drain. I drove around and threw a voice changer into a fire that had homeless people sitting around it. I gave them each a couple of dollars and watched the plastic casing melt and burn until there was almost nothing left of it. Then I went home. "Where have you been?" Julie asked, trying to grab my hand. I gently pushed her away. "I stopped by the hospital to see Bert," I said. She looked at me and then smiled. She tried to hide her smile. Knowing how her brain worked, or thinking I did, I knew she was glad I came to see Bert. This meant that I was still in the dark about what was going on between Bert and the others. Who would visit someone whom he considers his wife's lover? On the other hand, she was increasingly worried about my growing coldness. Over the past few days, I have noticed that she has been drinking more. Perhaps this is connected not only with what is happening between us. I felt that this was also due to the fact that she had turned from a voluntary woman of easy virtue into a forced one over the past few days. Plus the fact that the guys were literally discussing her shortcomings right in front of her. She had no one she could turn to. She couldn't talk to them because they were the ones who put her in this position. She couldn't talk to her friends because they were married to the men she slept with. And for the first time, she couldn't even talk to me, her loyal and supportive husband who had catered to her every whim since I laid eyes on her. The pressure quickly turned her into an alcoholic, and I hoped that she would drown in it. While she was preparing dinner, I made her drink even stronger. Throughout the dinner, I made sure that her glass did not remain empty. After dinner, when she came up to me and began to look at me with loving eyes, I moved away from her. "Liam, why are you pulling away from me?" she asked. There were notes of disappointment and suspicion in her voice. She twisted her tongue slightly. "It's been a few days now," she said, "and I want it now." "I told you I was having problems at work," I said. "I still haven't decided whether to accept the promotion." "I thought we settled this," she said slurringly. "You'll accept the promotion. We'll have more money and more time together, and then you'll stay home and get me pregnant. In fact, we should start this process right now." As soon as she said, "right now," she tried to get up and fell to the floor. "I think I'm drunk," she said and started laughing. I helped her get up and carried her to the bedroom. "That's exactly what I wanted," she said. "Take me to bed and have sex." Then she started laughing again. "Liam, do you like my breasts?" she asked. "Does Paula have better breasts than me?" "I've never seen Paula's breasts," I said. "Is Amanda prettier than me?" she asked. "You've seen her before, a long time ago." "I saw Amanda a few days ago," I said. "She's in town visiting her family right now." This seemed to sober her up quickly, or maybe it was just a moment of clarity. "Why didn't you tell me?" she asked loudly. "It didn't matter," I said. "We met by chance while I was out running on Sunday morning. We agreed to have lunch together this week to chat." "I don't think so," she said sharply. "No dinners with ex-girlfriends without my supervision." "Julie, she's a nun," I said. "It's not like anything could happen. Besides, you can't control me. You can't decide who I can or can't talk to or date. Have I ever told you what you can or can't do with your old friends?" She quickly stopped talking. Even drunk, she was afraid to open this topic for discussion, but the feeling of guilt on her face was overwhelming. "I love you, Liam," she said. "I really do. You know that, right?" I simply nodded. If she expected me to say the same thing in response, then she was in for a bummer. I mean, we're not like some couples, she started again. We're not together just because we don't want to be alone, right? Why are you even asking me such a question? I asked. Julie, you're drunk, aren't you? Well, even if you did, you could still have sex with me, she said. I put her in our bed and took off her clothes. By the time I finished undressing her, she was already purring. When I woke up the next morning, I quickly rolled over next to her. When she woke up, I pretended to be asleep. She turned to me and smiled. I opened my eyes and smiled back at her. Last night was great, honey, I said sleepily. Is it true? She said questioningly. The confusion on her face was priceless. She remembered me carrying her to bed, but she didn't remember us having sex or taking a shower. It was really good, she lied. So good that I'm ready for another time right now, she said. And you're ready too. Would you like to do it again? Oh shit, I screamed, jumping up. What's happened? She asked, sitting down. You need to stop doing this to me. I forget about everything. I need to be on the golf course in a while. I need to get dressed and leave. I don't even have time for breakfast. I jumped out of bed and threw on my clothes. I ran to the bathroom, shaved and brushed my teeth. I grabbed my golf clubs. I had to drive our Jeep because my clubs wouldn't fit in the trunk of the Mustang. I waved goodbye to Julie and left. I saw that she was thinking and trying to remember what happened. Then I decided to increase her alcohol consumption even more. I actually arrived at the golf course before Jeff and Greg. I ate a sandwich at the club and headed to the training ground. I was almost finished when they approached me. Hey, it's not fair to train, Greg said. I had to, I grinned. You guys always had more balls than me. Jeff laughed, but Greg didn't. He looked at me carefully and then smiled, but only a little. We just managed to enter the field. Since we didn't have a fourth player, we let another guy we saw at the club play with us. 6 holes later, I made an announcement. Hey guys, I said. It's 10 in the morning. Why don't we play 3 more and then break for lunch before the back 9 holes? Sounds like a plan, Jeff said. Since I seem to be losing anyway, maybe a break will change my luck. And so we did. We were sitting in the club trying to decide whether to raise the bets to $1 a shot or keep them at 50 cents when one of the club employees ran up to Jeff. Dr. Martin, she said excitedly, you have an urgent call. It's your wife. Jeff had a goofy smile on his face as he answered the phone. I guess the baby can't wash her belly with those big breasts. She probably needs me to come home and lift them up. What? He shouted. When? I'll be there now. Then he turned to us. The concern written on his face almost made me laugh. Are you going to need help lifting those breasts, Jeff? I asked. He looked at me like I was a fool. My clinic burned down this morning, he said sharply. I need to go there now. Sorry, Jeff, I said. I was just kidding. Do you want us to come with you? Could you? He asked. The 3 of us said goodbye to our new friend and headed to where Jeff's clinic once was. Paula was there talking to the police and firefighters when we pulled up. Jeff ran up and looked around. He was beside himself with rage. He continued to look at everything around him. The pain on his face couldn't compare to what I felt when I found out what he and my other supposed friends were doing to me, but it was a good start. The emotions running across his face were priceless. I wish I could write them down in my mind and play them over and over again. Everyone has heard of the 5 stages of grief. Jeff invented 5 stages of stupidity. He went from anger to humility to elation to realization to depression in seconds. Greg and I joined Jeff as the fire chief started talking to him. A faulty appliance appears to have caused a fire in a room full of paper. The fire spread to the rest of the building. He looked at Jeff strangely. The fire started around 10 in the morning, according to the guy from the supermarket across the street. He was collecting carts in the store's parking lot and noticed flames in your building, said the chief fire officer. They might want to know where you were at 10 o'clock this morning. That's normal procedure. It was obviously an accident. Me and two of my best friends were playing golf, Jeff said. There was another guy playing with us, and most of the club staff can confirm that I was there. None of us left the field once we started playing around 8:30. The clinic burned to the ground. She was declared a total loss. Jeff was devastated. He was barely paying off the mortgage on the place. All of Jeff's medical equipment was relatively new, and he was still paying for it. My buddy Jeff was so greedy, that's why he was so upset. When Jeff ran up and saw that his clinic had burned to the ground, he was furious. He tried to understand who and what could have caused this. He then accepted that it had happened and realized that he would have to make the best of it. For a while he was delighted because he could improve his situation. He could overestimate the value of his equipment to the insurance company and also get paid for a few pieces of equipment that he didn't use often but wouldn't replace them. He would use this money to buy what he really needed. And since the clinic had to be rebuilt, he would have designed it better than it was. He then realized that although the clinic was insured, he did not have fire insurance. This made him depressed because Jeff would still have to pay for everything that was destroyed, but he would be paying out of his own pocket. Plus, he will have to find money to build a new clinic. He was already so in debt that it simply seemed impossible. By the time the fire crews left the scene, Jeff was kneeling in the wreckage, performing his best Nancy Kerrigan impersonation. "For what?" he shouted. If only Jeff had known, his problems were just beginning. I think he wouldn't even have the energy to scream. Greg shook his head, looking at me. I smiled slightly, and I saw a chill run through him. "I think it's broken," he said. "Not yet," I replied. Greg didn't say a word. His eyes widened, and he nodded his head. "See you later, Liam," he said. He got into the car and drove away. I had plans for old Greg too, but I wanted to enjoy it and connect it to the rest of Jeff's fall. Looking back, it was a mistake, but it still worked. I decided to take care of Julie because she would be part of the rest of Jeff's destiny. I returned to where I paid two homeless men to watch me burn the voice control. I looked around until I found the right person. He didn't appear to be under the influence of illegal substances or alcohol. He was just unlucky. I asked him if he was willing to take the risk for a chance to start a new life. He looked at me like I was crazy and then started telling his story. "Seriously, buddy," he said. "I'm not looking for a handout, just a helping hand." I quickly moved away from him. He was not what I was looking for. The next person I approached had a permanently angry expression on his face. None of the other homeless people approached him. Surprisingly, he was the only one who didn't stink. "What?" he asked when I approached him. "What do you want? Tell that bitch she's not getting anything." I realized that I had found the right person. After talking with him, I learned that he was not homeless. He was a completely reasonable and intelligent person. He was simply let down by the legal system and family courts to the point that he decided that instead of giving his ex a dime, he would simply stop working and become homeless. "How would you like to take revenge on a woman who is just like your ex?" I asked. "My name is Melvin, and I am at your disposal," he smiled. I made a very favorable agreement with Melvin. I'll pay him in advance after his first show, and he'll get the rest from the insurance company and lawyers. I returned home to Julie. "Have you heard about Jeff's clinic?" I asked. "What's with her?" she asked. She was already drunk. She could barely stand and speak with difficulty. "Why are you asking me about Jeff? I have nothing in common with him. Do you think I like him or what?" "Julie, Jeff's clinic burned down this morning," I said. "Ha ha ha ha," she laughed. "That asshole deserved it." Then she looked around the room and looked into my eyes. "Sorry," she said. "I forgot that he is your friend." "Liam, why don't you love me anymore?" she asked. "I have two theories." She took the glass and took a long sip from it. Then I went to our bar and grabbed a bottle. She tried to remove the lid, but could not. I took the bottle from her and opened the cap. I poured into the glass 2 sleeping pills that Jeff had given me for her. "What are your theories, dear?" I asked. "Why do you call me darling?" she asked. "You don't care about me. You might as well call your car expensive. You treat her like a wife. That's how lucky I am. I fell in love with you, and I'm ready to do anything, just when you decided that you don't need me." She fell into a chair. "Give me my damn drink," she said. "Tell me your theories first," I said. "Why do you think I don't love you?" I waited for the pills to dissolve in the glass. "I have two theories," she said, "and I don't remember them." I realized that she was too drunk to notice whether the pills had dissolved or not. I handed her the glass. "Oh yes," she said. "I know everything. I think you and that nun are cheating on me. I talked to people who saw you together." "Julie, I told you that Amanda and I were going to lunch, remember?" I asked. "Oh yes," she said. "And I told you not to do it. I hate that bitch. It's good that you listened to me." "What's your other theory?" I asked. "Liam, I love you," she said. "But I was very bad. I think you might find out what I did and not love me anymore." "What did you do, Julie?" I asked. I looked at her as if I was really listening. These pills must have been very strong because her eyes were already starting to close. "You mean you don't know?" she asked. "I'm not stupid, Liam. I won't tell you if you don't know." "Damn, that's a relief. I feel better. Let's go upstairs and do this. Or maybe—" I looked at her as she tried to get up. "We need marshmallows and sticks," she suddenly said. "For what?" I asked. "Before we get into that, let's go to Jeff's burnt-out clinic and roast some marshmallows," she said and laughed until she collapsed into her chair again. I went down to the basement and found Melvin. I took him through the side door when I got home. "Ready?" I asked. He just nodded. "When will your friends be ready?" I asked. "As soon as you get me back to the park," he said. We went out into the backyard, and I showed him Julie's car. "Let's do it," I said. He nodded. "This is really going to hurt," I warned him. He ran as fast as he could to Julie's car. At the last moment, he stopped. "Do it, coward," I egged him on. He looked at me angrily. "Just pretend my drunk wife is your ex and she's driving." It worked. He accelerated again and drove to Julie's car. He jumped into the car and hit it so hard that the airbag deployed. As he bounced off the car, he also fell backwards and hit his head on the ground. He had a huge bruise on his head and a mark from the car grill on his ribs. "It's time." We pushed Julie's car into the front yard and left it on the lawn at an angle. I thought I could start it, but the devil wouldn't start. This was probably due to the deployment of the airbag. I called the police and reported Julie missing. They said I couldn't apply until she was gone for 24 hours. The guy's tone on the phone implied that I needed to have more control over my woman. We quickly jumped into my car, and I drove him to a nearby park where his friends were waiting. He lay down on the ground, and as if on cue, they all started screaming. As I drove away, I noticed in the rearview mirror that someone in the car had stopped to see what was going on. The man got out of the car with a cell phone. As I expected, some good Samaritan had already called the police. When I got home, I loaded the still sleeping Julie into her car. I put her in the front seat to make it look like she fell asleep at the wheel. I gently rubbed some of the chemicals from the airbag onto her face and neck. I placed an open bottle of alcohol on the seat next to her after dropping some onto her clothes. I put the keys in the ignition and went into the house to sleep. I was awakened by a loud knock on the door around 3 o'clock in the morning. The lights in my yard were flashing, and I saw not one, but 2 police cars in front of my house. "Are you William Bennett?" asked the officer. Yes," I said, as if I hadn't woken up yet. "Are you here to take my wife's missing person report? I've been waiting almost all night. I just dozed off." "Not really, sir," he said. "We put 2 and 2 together, and it worked for us." "I don't care about your math skills," I said. "I need to find Julie." "Well, we know where she is, sir," he said. "That's why we're here." "Where is she?" I asked. "Is she all right?" "Perhaps you'd better see for yourself," he said. There were at least 4 police officers standing around the car. Julie was still sleeping where I left her. She snored louder than a chainsaw, and some police officers laughed at the volume of her snoring. When I approached, the laughter stopped. "Did you bring her home?" I asked. "Why did you park it on my damn lawn?" The police looked at each other. Their expressions seemed to ask who would tell a madman what his wife had done. "Sir, we didn't park her. It appears your wife missed the driveway and ended up on the lawn by herself. She also appeared to be drunk," he said. I lowered my head as if I was overcome with deep shame. "She's been drinking a lot lately," I said sadly. In my head, I heard applause as if I had won an imaginary Oscar for Best Actor. "Well, take her out and bring her into the house," I said. "Sir, there is a problem with this," the same officer said. "It appears your wife was drunk for quite some time, and she was driving the car. She also had an open bottle of alcohol in the car. Several witnesses also saw your wife hit the pedestrian and drive away from the scene. The man is now in the hospital. Alone, one of the witnesses said she laughed after she hit the man. She also rolled down her window and shouted, 'Damn you,' and then drove off. We'll probably need to arrest her." "I'll hire 2 lawyers," I shouted. "One to get her out of jail and one to sue the police department. By the time this is over, I'll be the chief of police and I'll fire you all, you'll see." "Sir, please calm down," he said. "Why would you judge the police department? We were completely professional from the moment we arrived on scene." "Yes, you were," I said. "But if you had found her and stopped her when I first reported her missing, none of this would have happened. I'll tell the guy she hit the same thing. Maybe we can sue you together." "Where are you taking her?" I asked angrily. "The 3rd section," he said, smiling. I think he thought I was drunk too. "They have medical facilities for toxicology screenings and a large holding cell for drunks." I watched as they pulled Julie out of the car. "Leave me alone, Liam," she muttered loudly, still slurring her tongue. "We'll have sex again, a lot." "Poor guy," said one of the officers. A few hours later, I got a call. "Liam, it's me," Julie said. She sounded terrible. "I'm in trouble, honey. You have to come and get me out of here." "Where are you?" I asked. "I'm in jail," she said. They say I did a terrible thing, Liam." "I'll be right there," I said. I called her parents and told them what she told me. I didn't give any details, just said that they should meet me there. I took the bag from the trunk of the car and placed it on our doorstep so it would be there when we returned. I arrived there around the same time as Julie's parents. We all went in together. I learned that Julie's bail would cost us 10% of $200,000. The judge who arrested her early that morning wasn't kidding. Julie's trial was scheduled for 2 weeks from this morning, and if we don't buy her out, she'll remain in jail that entire time. Her mom and dad looked at me. I just shrugged. "She's been drinking a lot lately," I said. "I don't know why. We don't fight or anything. Maybe she's bored." "Do you have money?" asked her father. I nodded. "This will use up about half of our savings, but we can manage," I said. "I will need to find her help to stop drinking." "I can't believe she hit a man and drove away," he said. "It's not her, it's the alcohol," her mother said. "Stop it, Martha," my father-in-law said. "It wasn't a bottle of alcohol while driving a car. It was Julie. She was always a little wild before she met Liam. Maybe it's starting again." "Was Julie wild?" I said, as if I heard it for the first time. "I'll see you later, Liam," the father-in-law said, grabbing his wife's hand and leading her out of the police station. "We'll come see you later. If you need anything, let us know." That told me everything I needed to know. Her parents also knew that Julie was a woman of easy virtue. They didn't want to talk about it. They were sure she was done with it. I drove Julie home, pretending I was so angry I didn't want to talk to her. She kept trying to start conversations. "Liam, I'm so sorry," she said. "I do not remember anything." "I think they call it blackouts," I said. "You get so drunk that your mind just doesn't process anything for a while." She just looked at me. "I'll make it up to you," she said. "Julie, we'll have to be careful. We just spent half of our savings for your deposit. A significant portion of the remaining money will probably go to your lawyer. I'll have to work really hard to get a bigger bonus so we can have money in the bank." She just lowered her head and didn't say anything. "They impounded your car and took away your license, so you will be staying home for a while," I said. "Listen, honey, I really have to go to work today. I can't afford to miss many days, and I'll have to miss a few days for your trial. Can you handle it?" "Of course," she said. "I just need to take a shower and sleep in my bed." When we arrived at the house, we got out and Julie picked up the box. It was addressed to her. I pretended not to notice. I quickly kissed her on the cheek. She tried to turn around to kiss me on the lips, but I turned too and made sure that the kiss landed on my cheek. "That's not a good kiss," she said. "Honey, your breath smells terrible," I said. I left the house and went to work. On my way to work, I pulled off the freeway and stopped at another gas station that was not on my route. I bought another burner phone and it took 50 minutes. I paid cash so there would be no record of me owning the phone. I stopped at an electronics store near a gas station and bought another voice controller. I didn't really like this one because all the voices sounded like cartoon characters, but I was only going to use it a few times. I arrived at work and parked the Mustang in the parking lot. I activated the new burner phone and connected the voice manipulator to it. I started laughing because if it weren't for the fact that I could still pronounce words without starting them with an R, I would have sounded like Scooby-Doo. I called Julie at home and told her I was the one who sent her the package. At first, she became silent and then asked me who I was. The way she went silent let me know she had seen the video. "Listen, bitch," I barked. "You must think I'm as stupid as your husband. Why should I tell you who I am? I just need to know if you want to stay married." "Yes," she said. "Really, I do. I love my husband, so those bastards could force me to continue doing this." "Well, unless you want me to send him a copy of that CD I sent you, I want you to take $40,000 out of your account and put it in your gym bag." "We don't have that much," she said. "We had to spend half the money in the account to get me out of jail." "How much can you collect?" I asked rudely. "Maybe 20 or 15, she said. I could barely restrain myself from laughing into the phone. Then my blood began to boil as she spoke again. "I don't know where you got this video from," she said. "I've seen this file format before. It's the same high-definition format that iPhones use. So either you took this video yourself or you know someone who did. You could have gotten it from one of the men in the room. Anyway, what about the deal? I don't want to empty the account because my husband will find out and I won't have a way to explain it. If some of the money disappears, I can come up with an explanation. But if all the money disappears, he'll have to find out why. Maybe you'll agree to $10,000 and I'll give you part of what those guys got." I was shocked and even more angry. It took me a few seconds to make sure there wasn't an ounce of anger in my voice. "No," I said. "I'm not interested in sex with some old lady." "To hell with you," she spat. "I already told you no. Stop it. Despair is not good. Anyway, put the money in a coffee can. Put the coffee can in a gym bag and bring it to the park near your house. Fill the rest of the bag with old clothes or something. Then leave the bag on the bench near the playground at 4 o'clock. Then leave. If everything goes well, you will never hear from me again. But if there is no money, I will leave another disc on your doorstep, only I will personally give it to yours, to my husband." I hung up and went to meet with the realtor I had hired. She was a very nice old lady. She drove past the house, but had not yet seen it inside. She had a few questions about why I wanted to sell the house, so I was upfront with her. I told her that my wife was cheating on me with friends from our area, and since most people in the area knew about it, I could no longer live there. No one really knew about it except the cheaters themselves and me, but I thought she would be more sympathetic if she thought I was being humiliated on a daily basis. I showed her the home's appraisal from last year, and she was confident she could get even more. I told her to start looking for buyers and that I would accept any offer within 20% of the appraised value, but time was of the essence. Even if she has to resort to short selling, I want to get out of there as quickly as possible. At 3:15, I received a notification on my cell phone about a large withdrawal from my bank account. I smiled. I called the burner number, and an angry man answered the phone. I called the homeless shelter several times, and it seemed like all these people were always angry. I asked Melvin. Melvin responded, sounding like he was in a lot of pain. "Melvin, enough of the show," I said. "It's me. I need one of your guys to pick something up for me." At 3:50, I met Steve in front of the park where Julie was supposed to bring her bag. I gave him half a $50 bill and showed him the other half. I also reminded him of the money he will receive once everything is settled. He walked slowly through the park and arrived there at the same time as Julie. She put her bag on the bench and slowly walked away from it. Steve picked it up and watched Julie leave, then brought the bag to me. "I was just going to take the bag and run," he said. "But Melvin said you're a good guy, and Melvin hates everyone." "Don't worry, buddy," I said. "You did the right thing twice." I gave him the other half of the $50 bill. "How come I did it right twice?" he asked. "First of all, if you ran away, I would have shot you," I said. Of course I was lying. I didn't have a weapon. "And secondly," I said, pulling Julie's old clothes and underwear out of my bag, "the things in the bag have value only to me in my divorce proceedings." He looked at what I was pulling out of my bag and smiled. He was confident that he had made the best deal. "Are you sure you don't want to change?" I asked. He hid both halves of the $50 bill so quickly that his hands were a blur. I drove home and arrived there around the usual time. Julie couldn't meet my gaze. "I'm really sorry for what I did last night," she said. "I don't really remember getting into the car." "Julie, you've been forgetting a lot of things lately," I said. "Maybe you should check with a doctor." "Maybe I'm pregnant," she said. I looked worried. "Who are you sleeping with?" I asked. "Only with you, stupid," she smiled. "By the way, we haven't done anything for a long time, and I think our dry spell should end today. What do you think?" She came up to me and tried to kiss me. "Julie, you still smell like alcohol," I said. "I only had a couple of weak drinks," she said. "I've cut back a lot, and I won't drive." "Well, I guess that's okay," I said. "But you need to be careful. We have enough problems as it is." A few minutes later, Julie's parents arrived. We spent a pleasant evening with them. Her father took me aside and quietly told me that Julie was drinking again. I pretended to be shocked. "She told me she was going to quit," I said with feigned surprise. "Let's not make a scene and embarrass her. She's been through a lot already. I'll talk to her after you leave. Let's not ruin the evening." I was sure that he would nominate me for the title of Best Son-in-Law of the Year. As soon as their car pulled away from the curb, I gave Julie a drink. This time he had a lot of sleeping pills. Watching her eyelids become heavy as I waited for her to fall asleep, I carried her upstairs and laid her on our bed. The staircase to our bedroom was a metal frame with varnished wood steps leading up to the second floor. Even if one of the steps was missing, it would be impossible to fall because safety bars were also installed at the bottom of the frame. I removed the steps from the first and third steps at the top. I placed a couple of empty alcohol bottles in the kitchen and living room, then walked upstairs, avoiding the missed steps. I entered our bedroom. She didn't wake up. I knew that when she woke up, she would be sure that we had sex. The next morning, I woke up and started getting ready for work. He dribbled some alcohol onto Julie's lips and shook her slightly. She was sleepy, but was beginning to come to her senses. I easily ran down the stairs, avoiding the first and third steps, and left the house, loudly slamming the door. I purposely left my briefcase on the coffee table. Hearing the door slam, as I had hoped, Julie stood up. She walked out of our room and ended up falling down the stairs. It was a long way down, and the bitch deserved every bump she got. Perhaps Julie's actions turned me into some kind of sadist, but the thought of her tumbling down the steps made me laugh. I wanted her, Jeff, Greg, and Bert to feel the same pain I felt when I learned that the people I trusted the most had betrayed me. They treated me like a fool for so many years that I didn't want to think about it. My whole life from the moment I started dating this bitch has been a lie. She didn't even love me. She married me under false pretenses, and essentially I was just her breadwinner. Well, Julie, when you eat lunch, sooner or later you have to pay for the ticket. I waited about 5 minutes, then entered the house. I walked over to the coffee table, ostensibly looking for my briefcase. He saw Julie lying at the bottom of the stairs, moaning, and reacted immediately. "Honey, what are you doing on the floor?" I asked. I examined her and called the emergency services. "I fell, Liam," she said. "I don't know how. I walk up these steps every day." "Liam, take me upstairs so I can put something on," she said. "No, honey," I said. "You shouldn't move. I'll get a blanket to cover you and bring some clothes to the hospital." Again, I easily ran down the stairs. From where Julie lay, she couldn't see the steps above. I put the missing steps back in place and brought her clothes and a blanket. I covered it with a blanket and examined the ladder, pretending to check it for wear or defects. While I was inspecting the first and third steps, I put the screws back in. I'll tighten them up after it's all over. A few minutes later, the ambulance arrived. Julie had a dislocated right shoulder and a broken right ankle. Both wrists were severely sprained. The head injury did not seem serious. The paramedics took me aside and told me they thought she was drunk. "It's a good thing I had to go back for my briefcase," I said. "Buddy, calm down. Her injuries are not life-threatening, but you need to control her drinking," the chief medic said. She was eventually taken to the same hospital as yesterday. The nurses immediately smelled the odor and ran the toxicology screen again. "Why are you doing this?" I asked. "The screening showed something interesting yesterday," one of the nurses said. "Your wife had a sleeping pill in her system, but we have no record of any doctor in town prescribing it. In fact, the police are going to ask her about it. This is starting to look like a case of prescription drug addiction and alcoholism." When I entered the room, I noticed that her parents were there. Her father was angry and tried to contain it. He pulled me aside again. "Listen, Liam, this is getting worse," he said. "I have to leave work every damn day to deal with this. I'm not like you. I'm not a manager. I work with my hands and report to a schedule. So if I'm here, I'm not getting paid. We'll have to send her somewhere. Have you heard what she's saying now?" I shook my head. He looked at me. "She claims the stairs disappeared and then reappeared." My eyes widened. "Son, that's why they do sobriety tests. Have you ever noticed how many people can't walk in a straight line when they're drunk? They claim the line moved and all sorts of other ridiculous things." "Everything will be fine," I said. "We'll get through this together." "She's lucky to have you," he said. I just smiled. I walked over and stood by her bed. "I'm so sorry, honey," she said. "I don't know why this is happening to me. Ever since I met you, my luck has been so good, and now everything is going wrong." We sat with her for a while, then the police came in. We all had to leave the room while they questioned her about where she got the illegal substances. I looked at my watch several times and my father-in-law noticed. "If you have to go to work or anything, her mom and I will be here for a while," he said. "I'll call you if anything happens. They've already taken care of her injuries, so if the police are done, we can take her home." "Thank you, Dad," I said. I drove to work and answered several missed calls. One of them was from Amanda, and I decided to save it for last. I called my lawyer before calling her and found out that the divorce papers were ready to be served. Everything went according to plan. The lady from the real estate agency was confident that the house would sell by the end of the week. She had several shows planned for this morning. Both buyers had already seen the exterior of the house the day before yesterday and were just waiting to see the inside before making an offer. I called Amanda after that. I waited for the call to be answered. "Hello," said a very feminine voice. "Forgive me, Mother, for I have sinned," I said. "Very funny, Liam, but I'm not Mother Superior, I'm just a nun," Amanda said. "Forgive me, sister, for I have sinned," I laughed. "Liam, there's something I need to tell you before I lose my courage," she said. "Are we still going to have lunch today before I leave tomorrow?" "Of course we'll have lunch," I said, "but I didn't know you were leaving tomorrow." Well, that's why I put off our dinner for so long, she said. See you later. I looked through the papers on my desk to decide where to start. My boss came in and saw me at work. Liam, you'll miss this little office after your promotion, won't you? He asked. Not really, sir, I said. The office is just a place to work. I can work anywhere. He said. That's a very interesting statement. Liam, there is something I want you to think about. It will require a lot of changes, but since you and Julie don't have children, you might both like the idea. Our Chicago office is undergoing a change in management. We really need someone like you there. Of course, you don't have to accept this offer, but we would love to see you continue to rise through the ranks. You have a great work ethic that is contagious to those around you. The Chicago office needs such a person. If you agree, we will offer you a significant bonus for the move, as well as a salary increase. He smiled and left my office. The smile on my face was even wider than before. It was as if a weight had been lifted off my shoulders. A fresh start in a new place seemed perfect for me. Once I file for divorce and complete my revenge, I'll be there. It was like a sign from above. The chance to start over without the burden of the past was a gift from God. As much as I loved our city, everyone knew about each other's business. I was sure that even when I was done with them, everyone in town would be asking me how I felt about Julie cheating on me with my best friends. Every woman I dated would be afraid that I was driving Julie crazy. I had no doubt that I would go to Chicago very soon. The phone call brought me back from happy thoughts. I picked up the phone and realized it was a call to my cell phone, not my office phone. My father-in-law's number flashed on my iPhone screen. Liam, you should probably come back here. The police are threatening to arrest Julie again, he said. I'm on my way, I said. I weaved through the streets until I reached the freeway, then gave my Mustang full throttle. In a few seconds, I accelerated to almost 100 miles per hour and passed cars as if they were standing still. The exit I needed came too quickly and ended my fun. I drove the last 2 blocks at a more leisurely pace and parked in the hospital parking lot. As soon as I entered Julie's room, it was in complete chaos. Everyone looked at me when I entered. Mr. Bennett, maybe you can convince your wife, said the detective who handled her case. We've found out that it's not just alcohol in her system. There's also illegal controlled substances in there. Either she tells us where she got those pills from, or we charge her for both that and the hit and run. In that case, she might never see the light of day again. Officer, I began. Detective, he corrected. Whatever, I said. If you were as good detectives as you claim, you would have found her and stopped her when I first reported her missing. None of this would have happened. My wife is facing a serious prison sentence and many other problems while we argue about your job description. He retreated. He could tell by my voice that I was angry, but in reality I was just acting. My father-in-law and mother-in-law were impressed by my supposed protection of their daughter. The police knew I was serious. I was preparing them all for the next step. To me, a detective is a person who looks at patterns and solves crimes. Great detectives can sometimes prevent crimes. A detective is not a fat, gluttonous sloth who waits until the crime is over and tries to pressure sick women into confessing, for which they are not guilty. As a detective, I think that you could not find your foot in your own shoe. Calm down, Mr. Bennett, he said angrily. I'm trying to do exactly what you said. I don't want to press charges against your wife, and I see that she needs help. She suffered near-fatal effects from an unpleasant combination of illegal substances. I just want to know where she got these pills to remove them from the streets and prevent similar cases from other people. Can you understand this? Your wife is not a dealer, but if she doesn't say where she got the pills from, I will be forced to consider her part of this case because she protects the one or those who gave them. She needs these pills. So if you find out where she got the pills from, you won't charge her with possession, I asked. He nodded. That's not enough, I said. I want your word in writing and in front of all these witnesses that if you find out where she got the pills from, you will not charge her. You have my word in front of all these witnesses, he said angrily. Then leave my wife alone, I said. I can tell you where she got the pills from. He looked at me strangely. Did you give them to her? He asked. What a great detective, I spat. Here, look at this. I took out my iPhone and showed him the video I took. I skipped the sex scene and replayed the conversation where Jeff gave Julie sleeping pills and told her to put them in me so they could have sex with her. When the video ended, the room was as quiet as a tomb. The sound of an ant farting would sound like thunder. Everyone looked at me with a mixture of shock, horror, and sympathy. I could tell the police thought I was crazy. I was some poor, stupid guy who seemed to love his wife enough to try to help her, even though several of his friends were having sex with her behind his back. Julie was the first to break the silence. Liam, it's not true, she whined. I love you, I swear. Maybe it wasn't like that at first. Maybe at first I was just using you because I lost my way, but... Julie, how could you? Asked her mother. I can't believe I raised such a slutty woman, her father said. Come on, honey, I can't listen to this nonsense anymore. Mr. Bennett, the detective said quietly, I need your phone number. I also need to identify the people in the video, especially the one who gave your wife the illegal substances. This is Dr. Jeffrey Martin, Maryland, my supposed best friend for life, I said. I handed him my iPhone. He nodded at me as Julie continued to sob in the background. Suddenly, I noticed that the room was almost empty, as if everyone just wanted to get out of there. The nurses who were there have all left. Julie's parents had left, and even the other detectives besides the one I'd spoken to had left the room to laugh at me or find somewhere else to be. Mrs. Bennett, there will be an officer outside your room for the next few hours. You are still out on bail on other charges, so even if you are released, do not leave town. My condolences, Mr. Bennett, he said. He seemed to sincerely feel sorry for me. When he left the room, only Julie and I were left there. She looked at me with tears in her eyes. I'm sorry, Liam, she began. How long have you known? Not for long, I lied. Some voice on the phone who sounded like Scooby-Doo charged me $2,000 for this video. That bastard, she spat. I paid him $20,000 so he wouldn't show it to you. No wonder all our money is gone, I said. Julie, between your rescue, your lawyer's fees, and the money we spent on the video of you having sex with our friends, we have no money left in the bank. Our bank balance is about $12. I may have to take out a loan on my house to pay my lawyer. You ruined us. Liam, we're still young. We can save money again, and I will never do anything like that again, she said. I give you my word that I will never drink again. Julie, you said one wrong thing, I said quietly. No, I didn't do that, she said. I know that yesterday, when I got out of prison, I told you that I wouldn't drink anymore. I really mean it this time, Liam. I wasn't talking about drinking, I said. I meant everything else. I was ready to support you when I thought you were just a drunk. But I will not live with a woman of easy virtue. I'm filing for divorce. No, Liam, she screamed. You cannot. All the machines that were monitoring her vital signs began to show that her heart rate, oxygen usage, and blood pressure levels were off the charts. The nurse came in to see what was going on. Look at me, I said coldly. Liam, please give me a chance to explain all of this, she said. What chance did you give me? I snapped. You came to me before we got married and said, Liam, I don't really love you and I'm having sex with your friends. Did you say, Liam, I want to marry you so you can support me and kick your own ass? Provide for me so that I don't have to work myself. I don't remember this conversation. She started crying, but it didn't work. Her tears no longer affected me. The heat of my rage simply burned her tears like a forest fire burns and makes a spring shower useless. I headed towards the door. I never turned around to look at her. It was all I could do not to laugh as I left the room. Mentally, I wrote another point against her and another against Jeff on the board. I wanted to put it all aside and concentrate on lunch with Amanda. After this, I'll take care of my revenge on Greg and leave all this crap behind me before moving to Chicago. I got to Texas Roadhouse just before Amanda arrived. I had barely sat down when she entered the restaurant. Amanda didn't have huge breasts like Jeff's wife Paula, but there was something about them. She was not the kind of woman who attracts attention, but she was simply beautiful, even in the outdated and very strict attire that nuns were allowed to wear when they broke out of their habits. The eyes of most of the men in the room were fixed on her. And when she noticed me and smiled at me, it became obvious that her smile was intended only for me. Most other men were jealous. She sat down opposite me and looked into my eyes carefully. Our waiter came over immediately. I couldn't believe this little bastard. He was carrying a tray of food intended for another table. I sat there for a few minutes and he completely ignored me, but as soon as Amanda showed up, the asshole made a beeline for the table. I mentally reminded myself to leave a couple of dollars of his tip, although if I were him, I probably would have done the same. As soon as he took our orders, Amanda looked me in the eyes again. "Okay, lay it out," I said. "What?" she asked. "Can't I just enjoy seeing an old friend?" "Mandy, even when I saw you in the park and every time we talked on the phone since then, I got the impression that you wanted to talk about something," I said. "Liam, you could always read me," she smiled. "No, Mandy, I couldn't," I smiled. "Yes, you could," she countered. "You always knew before anyone else when I was happy or sad about something, and you always seemed to know what to do with it. I have heard from most of my friends that men have heads like cement blocks. Your wife really is so lucky. Mandy, if I were half as intuitive as you say I am, I would sense that the girl I fell in love with was going to leave me for the church. I would know enough to know that I would use my virtue and fall in love with you even more, and then you would break my heart when you left college for a monastery," I said bitterly. The worry on her face came out of nowhere. One minute she was beaming and smiling at me, and the next she knew what I was going through. She raised a thin hand to her mouth. "Oh, Liam, I never knew," she said. "For most of my life before I met you, I wavered between two dreams. On the one hand, I wanted to serve the Lord like my aunt. On the other hand, I wanted to be a teacher and work with young children. I had a lot of questions about things like love, sex, and dating, but they never seemed to fit into my plans. My plan included going to college for 2 years, getting an associate's degree, and finishing college at a seminary. I had these questions about love and sex, and I wanted to experience it before I committed myself to the Lord. My aunt told me not to worry about it and just use protection and go for it. She told me that I was a beautiful young woman and that it would not be difficult to find a man who could do the job. She also told me that men are not like us. Most guys would just have sex with me and leave, no strings attached. I was the problem, Liam. I'm not the kind of girl who will just chase some random guy that I have no feelings for. I always liked you, and we were very close. Most people who knew us thought we were boyfriend and girlfriend, Liam. I had very strong feelings for you, so I thought you would be the perfect man that would ever be." She looked at the horror written on my face. "This may be exactly what I've been going through over the past couple of weeks, but I was closer to beating the crap out of the girl of my dreams than I ever thought possible." I fell back into my chair and waited for lightning to strike me from above, just to think about it. "So," I said as soon as I pulled myself together, "there I thought that we were in love when I was just a couple of calls from the monastery." Amanda, "No, Liam," she said. "Amanda, I was devastated," I said. "As for simply leaving after sex without any strings attached, I was depressed for almost 2 years. I didn't date, didn't even go out. I barely finished school. Even my grades dropped. I wanted strings, Amanda. I wanted strings so damn much." I slammed my fist on the table. "I would give anything to be tied to you," I hissed. After that, I had to take a big sip of water. "Liam, you don't understand," she said quietly. "This whole lunch has gone awry. If one more damn person tells me today that I don't understand anything," I said, draining the water and calling the waiter over. He looked at me like I was crazy. "Bring me," I started, and then my brain took over. Getting drunk wouldn't help me, but I needed something stronger than water. "Bring me Dos Equis Amber," I said. He nodded and quickly left. Maybe it was a mistake, she said. As I looked at her, 2 lines of moisture rolled down her beautiful cheeks. Her usually angelic composure had faded, and she was no longer the perfect nun. She was no longer the beautiful, inaccessible, stoic woman. She was just the girl I grew up with. She was just my friend Mandy again. And as always, I walked around the table and hugged her. "Liam, I ruined everything," she cried quietly. "I really loved you then. I just didn't know it. I was just a stupid little girl. I was like those boys who grow up thinking they want to be a race car driver all their lives, and then one day they get behind the wheel of a car and find out that they really can't drive that well. I graduated from college, but I never forgot about you and what happened between us. By the time I graduated from school and had to take my position among the sisters, I returned home to reflect before taking my vows. I didn't really come back to brood. I came back to see if we had a chance. Maybe I just wanted to see you and see what we had. Was it just in my head?" "You never did this," I snapped. "If you have." "Liam, when I came back here, you had just gotten married," she said. "I knew it was a sign that nothing was meant to happen between us. I figured you just left, like my aunt said. I returned to the monastery and took up my career. I liked teaching, or so I thought. But over the past few years, I've had to make some really scary discoveries. I became a nun for all the wrong reasons. I became a nun because I wanted to be like my favorite aunt by working with children, but I really don't support a lot of what's going on inside the church right now. I recently made the biggest discovery of all. I enjoy working with children, but I think what I really want is my own." I just looked at her with my mouth open. "Everything is going completely wrong," she said. "Maybe we should do this some other time. I guess I'm just having a crisis of faith. If I have any faith at all. Maybe I never had any fucking faith at all." Tears were streaming down her face quickly now. She suddenly just got up and left the restaurant. And as usual, if I was lucky, the food arrived just a few minutes after she left. The incredibly stupid waiter began placing plates of food on the table, and I put my head in my hands, wondering what had just happened. "This is for me?" asked a soft voice with a southern accent. I raised my head and looked at the biggest breasts in the state. It was Paula. No woman of such wealth should be allowed to wear a blouse with such a low neckline. All the blood that was flowing in my brain during the extremely emotional conversation with Amanda flowed into my nether regions. "Why not?" I said, putting my head back on the table. "Okay, let's eat and then go back to your house," she said. "Why do we have to go to my house?" I asked. "So you can have sex with me," she said angrily. "What?" I asked in surprise. "Liam, do you know where I've been for the last hour?" she asked between bites of Amanda's steak. "I was running back and forth between the prison and the courthouse while my marriage fell apart in the closet. I was called to the jail because, while Jeff was running around, he was trying to negotiate an office share with another doctor in the area. He was arrested. I thought maybe he was speeding or something. He has been very angry since the clinic burned down, and we found out that we would be in debt practically forever. We will have to pay off the mortgage on a building that no longer exists. We have to pay for a bunch of expensive medical equipment that no longer exists, and until we do this, none of the banks will even think about giving us a loan to rebuild the clinic or buy new equipment. My husband may have been on his way to becoming the first medical practitioner to receive benefits, but that probably won't happen now," she laughed. "Damn, this is the best steak I've ever eaten." "So, Paula, what does this have to do with?" I began. "Are we going to have sex?" she asked. "I just got to this point. I got there and found out that Dr. Stupid was arrested for giving unlicensed controlled substances to a person without a prescription. But you know all that, don't you? You know that my husband, who has been your best friend for most of your life, gave your stinking wife, who he slept with before we were married, illegal substances to put you to sleep so he could have sex with her." Oh my God, I thought. In less than an hour, Paula portrayed the 3 crying women I had to deal with. "Why, Liam?" she asked, continuing to eat. I started to think those breasts were filled with steak and not milk. "Why does he need her if he has me? She's not even as pretty as that girl you were stuck with in college. And I feel so bad for you because they basically put this all together so that you could marry her just so she wouldn't have to get off her fat ass and get a job, but also so they could continue to sleep with her. Did you know they just take turns doing it? Yes, Paula, I said, but thanks for reminding me. When I talked to him, he apologized for it. He told me all sorts of bullshit about how he needed to act out his basest urges and do things that were too disgusting to do to the woman he loved. He told me that she would do literally anything they wanted. He told me that even before he forced her to marry you, he took her to the train station and let bums have sex with her. I asked him how he could do this to you when you were always like a brother to him. He seemed to think he was doing both you and her a favor. By forcing you to marry her, he brought you back from your depression. He also gave you someone who would take care of you and make sure you weren't alone. In her case, she didn't have to work, and she found a really nice guy. But after thinking about it, I think the real reason he did it was to keep having sex with her. She is not beautiful enough for him to marry, and he would never marry a woman he considered a woman of easy virtue, especially when all his friends are sleeping with her. But he wanted her to be nearby and available. He knew that real women are people. This means that we have our ups and downs, and we ourselves have emotions and needs. No matter who he marries, he probably won't get all the sex he wants or in every possible way. I mean, I like sex as much as the next girl, but Jeff knows I have to be in the mood. She finished her steak and was looking at mine. He just wanted to have his own personal woman of easy virtue. He wanted to have his cake and eat it too. But as Saxon Hart says, it's time for him to have his damn cake. I'm fucking his ass right away, but other than that I need to make him eat such a damn big piece of cake that he'll choke. So I want us to go down to the prison and get him another video. I want to give him something to watch to warm his twisted bones, damn heart. I want to give him a video of you having sex with me. Tina is also very angry with Greg, so you have to satisfy 3 angry women, and I want to be the first. Paula, you are a beautiful woman, I said, and you deserve better than what you have. But if we did that, it would simply humiliate us both. When you give yourself to a man, it should be someone for whom you have feelings and who, in turn, loves and respects you. If we did this, you would be no better than Julie, and I would be like Jeff. We're better than that. She started crying, and I walked around the table and hugged her. She buried her face in my neck. But don't you want to take revenge on him? She was crying. That bastard has to pay. One day he'll do it, I said. What are you going to do? She asked. Please don't tell me you're going back to her. No, I said. I can't do this. Okay, she spat. You are too good for this woman of easy virtue. I'll probably move to another state and start over, I said. It would be better for everyone if she left town, she said. She reached over, cut off a corner of my steak, and put it in her mouth. Is this some kind of steak sauce you have? She asked. It's a mixture of mushroom sauce and pepper sauce, I said. She turned and pushed my plate towards me. She started eating my steak while I watched. This sauce is amazing, she said. Basically, this bastard wants to see you. I think he wants to apologize to you and hopes for your help. He doesn't have any money, she snorted. After I found out what he did, I withdrew all the money from our accounts. Let him rot in prison. I called the waiter and paid for the food. Then I hugged Paula and left the restaurant. I went to prison. I asked to see Jeff and was told he was waiting for me. He smiled when I entered the room. Our town was so small that we didn't have all the things they see on TV. It was just an ordinary room with a locked door. Jeff couldn't get up because he was chained to a large bracket driven into the floor. His smile disappeared when he noticed that I wasn't answering him. Sorry, Liam, he said. I'm very, very sorry. Why are you sorry, Jeff? I asked. Do you really feel remorse for what you did, or are you just sorry you got caught? Are you sorry that you conspired with my wife to drug me so you could sleep with her? Or are you sorry that you helped me marry her under false pretenses? Are you sorry that you slept with the woman I loved behind my back? What exactly are you sorry for? Well, he began. Fuck you, Jeff. I spat, not letting him finish. I have a business. Paula came to see me. She invited me to sleep with her. Of course I agreed. So Jeff, while you're locked here tonight, I'll take my revenge. Maybe when you get out, if you don't mind taking care of my children, I'll give her back to you. No, you won't, he stuttered. Yes, I will, Jeff, I growled. She wants it, and so do I. And with all the charges against you, there's nothing you can do about it. I wasn't stupid enough to tell him everything, but I was sure that now that the police were investigating him, it wouldn't be long before he was accused of setting the clinic on fire. He was screaming and begging me not to do this when I knocked on the door and the guard let me out. My next step was to the hospital. I walked in and saw Bert. As soon as I entered the room, I heard him crying. He looked at me. Hi, Bert, I said. He lowered his head. Why, Bert, I asked. I thought we were friends. It's all Jeff, he said. Greg and I just followed him. He laughed at you all the time. It was like a joke. On one hand, you thought she was a good girl when she was probably the biggest prostitute in town. It was a shitty deal, but Liam, shit happens to all of us. Look at me. At first, they just punched me in the face. Now I know that I will never be able to swing a golf club again. Didn't your wife leave you when she found out you were cheating? I asked. Hell no, he spat. At that moment, I turned and saw Julia behind me. I talked to Paula, I told him. She told me that Elaine and Tina both went crazy when they heard what you bastards did. It didn't matter, he said. She's using cheating as grounds for divorce, but she actually left me last week when she found out. He started crying, and it felt strange to see him cry. It's strange to see another man cry like a child. If she didn't know about the betrayal, why did she leave last week? I asked. Because for a long time, all Elaine talked about was children, he cried. And the bastard who beat me. I can't have any more children, Liam. That's why Elaine left me. She didn't find out I cheated until this morning. Fate took away everything I loved from me. My golf game, my health, my marriage, my wife, it's all gone, Liam. Fate took everything. Well, at least in your case, it was fate, I spat. The guys I thought were my best friends stole my life. But Liam, no one stole me from you, Julia said. All we lost was some stupid money. You can take a promotion, and we will save some time. We will not go anywhere, and we will not go on vacation this year. The difference is that now I know that I really love you. I like the way you treat me. We can start all over again, and it will be as if none of this happened. And the guys all left. Jeff is in jail. Bert was only half left, and Greg's missing, so. What do you mean Greg is missing? I asked. Tina came in. She wanted to kick my ass. She cursed me, and before she left, she asked if I knew where Greg was. She checked their bank accounts, and Greg withdrew half the money from their checking account and simply disappeared. Now, let's get back to what we were talking about, she said. Nobody stole me from you, dear. I know it seems bad, but we can. No one needed to steal you from me, I said sharply. You were never mine. It was just some sick joke, but now it's my turn to laugh. Now, you mean Tina has no idea where Greg is? Crap. It really pissed me off that Greg left me. Forget about Greg, she said. What about us? What's our next step? Know us, you psychotic bitch. We're getting a divorce. My lawyer will probably have the paperwork ready in a few days. We can file for no-fault divorce and just go our separate ways. This will be the easiest way. I'll keep my cars, you keep yours, and we'll split the proceeds from the sale of the house minus the money we spent on your bail and lawyer. I think it's only fair that you should pay for this since all of this happened because of your actions. So if we get 80,000 or less for the house, you get 20. 20? She screamed. How is this fair? We had $40,000 in our bank account, I said. They all left. Even with an equal division, only half of it would be yours. Even though I earned all the money since you never worked, you would still be entitled to half. All the money either went towards your bail or the lawyer's fees or you spent it, so you owe me 20,000. So if the house sells for 80 or less, we'll each get 40, minus the 20 you owe me. Our house cost more than 80, she said. We won't get its market value, I said. I want to sell it quickly and leave. I need to get away from all this crap and start my life over in a place where people won't laugh at me when I walk down the street. No, Liam, she cried. We won't do that. We have to go through the divorce process. I thought about that. We must exhaust all possibilities to save our marriage. First, I want us to see a counselor. If that doesn't work, we'll do a trial separation and then get back together to see what we've learned while apart. If we are still angry, we will have a legal separation, and in a year we will begin the divorce process. That's what my aunt did. Your aunt was crazy, I said sharply. Your uncle cheated on her throughout their entire marriage. She was stupid for putting up with this. He cheated on her the entire time they were apart. He never stopped cheating on her until he died of a heart attack. I'm not your aunt. I'm not trying to save our marriage. I don't want you to change for me. Apparently you have always been like this, and I agree with that. I just want you to be married to someone else. I'm tired of being a fool. Liam, what are you talking about? She said. You have never been a fool. I asked him how he could do this to you when you were always like a brother to him. He seemed to think he was doing both you and her a favor. By forcing you to marry her, he brought you back from your depression. He also gave you someone who would take care of you and make sure you weren't alone. In her case, she didn't have to work, and she found a really nice guy. But after thinking about it, I think the real reason he did it was to keep having sex with her. She is not beautiful enough for him to marry, and he would never marry a woman he considered a woman of easy virtue, especially when all his friends are sleeping with her. But he wanted her to be nearby and available. He knew that real women are people. This means that we have our ups and downs, and we ourselves have emotions and needs. No matter who he marries, he probably won't get all the sex he wants or in every possible way. I mean, I like sex as much as the next girl, but Jeff knows I have to be in the mood. She finished her steak and was looking at mine. I would call you the man who loves me, she said. I would call you the man I really love. And I have to believe it? I asked. When you told me and all our friends that when we got married, it wasn't true, was it? She shook her head. But Liam. No buts, I said sharply. If you don't want a no-fault divorce, Julia, we can make it the hard way. We can file for divorce on charges of adultery, disgracing your name and letting everyone in town know what you're like. Trust me, Julia, you won't like this. It's a small town, there's not much dirt here. Your whole family will be embarrassed, and you'll probably get nothing. You're better off leaving with some money and what's left of your reputation intact. But I really don't want a divorce, she whined. We can fix this. We can be better than ever. I won't be with other guys anymore. I don't care what you want, Julia. We can't fix it, and we can't get better because it was all a lie. It was never real, and you didn't leave the other guys. They left you. Greg left town. Bert is a cripple whose stuff doesn't work anymore, and Jeff will be too busy. My lawyer will send the papers in a day or two when they're ready. Just sign them, Julia, and let it die. If the hospital discharges you, go to your parents. I'll arrange access to the house so you can get all your things before I leave town. I called my boss and told him to prepare a check for the relocation bonus because I wanted a job in Chicago. I started planning the move, and a few days later, I drove to Chicago to tour the office and hire a realtor to find a home. I returned home tired and visited Julia's parents again. So you really can't save it? Her mother asked through tears. I just shook my head. I tried to stay with her. I was ready to stay with her when she hit that man and fled the scene, but it was too much for me. It broke my heart to find out that she slept with all my friends behind my back. But the real blow was to find out that she never loved me from the very beginning. I'll miss you too as much as I miss her, but I need to find someone who really cares about me. We all hugged each other, and they agreed to come the next day with a truck and pick up all of Julia's things. It was a sad end to what I thought was a great marriage. Julia received a suspended sentence for controlled substance and alcohol charges with the condition that she undergo treatment. She was given 6 months for driving over Melvin while intoxicated and another 6 months for leaving the scene of an accident. So Julia spent almost a year in prison. Melvin also sued her in civil court and received $30,000 in damages plus all medical bills. This completely wiped out all the money Julia received from our divorce agreement and more. She had to get a job at a fast food restaurant to try to pay her parents back. Even before I left town, no one wanted to deal with her. Jeff was accused of setting his clinic on fire. He was also charged with dispensing an unlicensed controlled substance and several other charges. Jeff spent 6 years behind bars and another year on parole. He also lost his license to practice medicine. Before he went to prison, Paula began divorce proceedings and siphoned off all their assets. Jeff ended up living in the same homeless shelter that Melvin once lived in, and no one liked him there. They were tired of hearing him say that he was a doctor. Most of them didn't believe him. Bert spent several years in rehab before attempting to return to teaching. He will always have a noticeable limp, and one of his arms is only 20% functional. His wife got married about a year after I left town and now has 2 children. Melvin took the money from the civil suit against Julia and opened his own temp service. He finds jobs for the homeless and others who need to get back on their feet. Over time, he overcame his anger and began to help women too, but he refused to help any woman who cheated on her husband. Surprisingly, Melvin remarried and has a child. Tina began divorce proceedings against Greg. She applied to leave and had to wait a year. She received their house and all other assets that Greg did not take with him. She also filed a complaint with the state and national bar associations in an attempt to make it more difficult for him to practice law, but neither her divorce nor the complaint were finalized. The day I was ready to leave town, I received a call. "Hello, Liam. This situation was bothering me, so I decided to call you and apologize for my role in this," he said. My temperature rose when I realized who it was. "Why didn't you come and tell me this personally, like a man, Greg?" I asked. "Well, old friend, because your wife is a woman of easy virtue, Jeff is an arrogant bastard, and Bert is a fool," he said. "Of all of us, you were the best. You are a real, honest guy. I'm slippery like a snake. I am a lawyer. I lie to people for my life. But I'm also not stupid. I may not be a genius, but I feel the way the wind is blowing." "What the hell are you talking about?" I said. "I didn't ask you for a weather forecast." "Come on, Liam," he said. "You cannot deceive a deceiver. Your wife's life is ruined, and she's going to jail. Jeff is in prison and will never be able to practice medicine again. He allegedly set fire to his own clinic. And poor Bert lost everything too. What do all 4 of us have in common? You're angry at all of us. When Bert went down, I became suspicious because you weren't as concerned about him as usual. At first, I thought you might have a problem. But when Jeff's life went downhill and your wife started having problems too, I knew it was only a matter of time before you got to me, so I left town. My mother didn't raise stupid children. Anyway, I just wanted you to know that I will never return to the city for any reason. Tina can take our little house and everything she can take. I'm doing something completely different now, but whatever that means, I really regret what we did. I don't regret sleeping with Julia, but to be honest, she wasn't that good. She was just available. What I regret is the betrayal of our friendship. All 4 of us grew up together. Friendship for life is a very rare occurrence. I'm sorry I let that arrogant bastard ruin our friendship." And with that, he passed out. I threw the phone and knocked it off the table. I was angrier than I had ever been in my life. My first few months in Chicago were a whirlwind of activity. I settled into a small studio apartment while I looked for a suitable home in the suburbs that would fit my new position. I spent every weekend looking at houses, but I still couldn't get Greg out of my head. It got to the point where his search became more important than the other 3. I hired 2 private investigators to find him. Finally, after 5 months, 3 weeks and 4 days, one of my detectives found him. Greg lived near me. He lived in Detroit and worked for a legal website under the name George Peters. The bastard didn't even change his initials. He lived in a squalid apartment on the east side near the city center. His was the kind of neighborhood where everyone minds their own business and a random beating doesn't raise suspicions. Even if there are suspicions, people know it is better to mind their own business. I still remember my glee when George, aka Greg, opened the door to his apartment and walked in. "I hate this damn place," he told the walls. "Damn bitch," he spat. "I guess that bitch wasn't as big a woman of easy virtue as Julia, huh, Greg?" I said, coming out of the shadows. "What are you doing, Liam?" he asked. "Hi, Greg," I smiled at him. "Now, Greg," I said, "the sooner we figure this out, the sooner I can leave you alone." "What do you want me to do?" he asked, looking at me suspiciously. I think the fact that I was wearing rubber gloves made him think I was going to do something nasty. "Just have a drink with an old friend and explain to me why you needed to sleep with Julia," I said. I gave him a bottle of vodka, and he started drinking and talking about the first time he saw Julia in college. After half an hour of drinking and talking and several bottles of strong alcohol, he became pliable. "Listen, Liam," he said, looking out as if he was having trouble concentrating. "What are you going to do to me?" "Nothing," I said. "You already did it yourself. Your career is over. You don't have a life anymore. Only in your case, everything is worse. I didn't even do this to you. You did it yourself." "Yes, I probably did," he said. He drank more and began to fall asleep. "Greg, wake up," I said. "I'm going to leave soon. You never told me about Julia or signed the paper." "Where's the damn pen?" he asked. "Greg, you have it in your hand," I said. "Oh, yes," he said, looking at her. He started talking about Julia, but nothing was clear. He said that Julia loved me very much. He looked at the pen in his hand and signed the note I had typed from his work computer. "Everything is signed," he said, taking another sip. "Have I told you how sorry I am?" he said. "Yes, several times," I said. "So to keep things fair and balanced," I said. "I should shoot myself," he said with a smile, taking another sip. I remained silent and just nodded my head. He picked up the gun from the table and didn't notice the extra weight from the inserted magazine. I looked around the room to see if there was anything that could connect me to this. Even though I was still wearing gloves, I wiped off anything I thought I might have touched and left the room. I knew what I did was wrong. I've been a good guy all my life, and all my life people treated me like a simpleton. I didn't kill Greg. He did it himself. My original plan was only to revoke his license to practice law. But he pissed me off, and he got what he deserved, with interest. I left his house and took a bus to the city center. From the bus station in downtown Detroit, I took a bus to Port Huron, Michigan. Port Huron is just over 50 miles from Detroit. From there, I took another bus back to Chicago. The convoluted route was in case it was ever investigated. There will be no evidence that anyone like me drove from Detroit to Chicago. The route from Port Huron to Chicago took over 6 hours by bus. I had a lot of time to think. I wondered if I was still the same person after everything that had happened. I always considered myself a good guy. Am I still a good person? After all the books I'd read and all the movies I'd seen, I probably expected to feel sadness or remorse. I think I should be sad or heartbroken or apologetic about something. But the truth is that I didn't feel anything. It didn't seem to me that tricking this bastard into putting a bullet in his head was a great loss to the world. And for me personally, it just brought relief. I felt like a really shitty chapter of my life was over. When I got off the bus after all the books I'd read and all the movies I'd seen, I probably expected to feel sadness or remorse. I think I should be sad or heartbroken or apologetic about something. But the truth is that I didn't feel anything. It didn't seem to me that tricking this bastard into putting a bullet in his head was a great loss to the world. And for me personally, it just brought relief. I felt like a really shitty chapter of my life was over as in Chicago and took a taxi to my apartment. I sang within myself. When I entered the apartment and looked around, I laughed. I've been here for months and never unpacked. I guess I always knew this place would never be home. I had narrowed it down to 4 or 5 houses, but was no closer to choosing one than I was a month ago. As soon as I closed the door, I noticed that the phone was ringing. Before I reached him, he stopped calling. I checked my messages and saw that I had 8 messages in the 2 days I was gone. 4 of them were from Julia. In addition to the prison number, which I remembered, I noticed that the calls were at 6 in the evening and at 8:30 in the evening both evenings. Julia was only allowed to make calls between 6 and 9 in the evening. If she called after 8:30, she had little time to talk. There were also several calls from Julia's parents. I loved them, but I was tired of talking to them. Every call, no matter how it started, always ended with questions about whether I was ready to talk to Julia, or they ended with how much Julia wants me back and how bad she feels. The other 2 calls were from the same number, and I didn't recognize it. I called out of curiosity. The voice on the phone was melodious and familiar. There was an intensity in that voice that I had never heard, but it was a voice I needed to talk to. "Our last conversation didn't go according to plan, Liam," she said. "I didn't know there was a plan, so it was hard to follow it," I said. She laughed. "Liam, I wanted to talk to you about doubts," she said. "You know, nuns are just women. They are not divine. They also make mistakes and bad decisions. They too need to pray for guidance just like everyone else." "I have a hard time imagining you making bad decisions," I said. "Well, I did," she said, "and I did another one with you last time. I made 2. "Wow," I said sarcastically. "Liam, for the last few years I've been unsatisfied," she began. "I would think it was longer than a few years," I said. "You know what I mean," she said. "I just wasn't sure I was making a difference. I wasn't sure I made the right career choice, you know? Is it like those people in the Peace Corps who go overseas to help poor people?" I said. "Then, once there, they realize that they don't really care about poor people. They then realize that they are stuck there for a period of time, and since they have a job and a uniform, they just carry on." "Well, that's not entirely true," she said. "Liam, the first mistake I made was asking you a question that should never have been considered. I thought you were a happily married man." "Mandy, I'm a happily single man now," I said. "What was the second mistake you made?" "I don't care if I ask you questions," she said. "But I never realized I hurt you so much, Liam. After I ran out of the restaurant, I spent the whole day talking to our old friends about you, and everything you said was true. Liam, if you loved me so much, why didn't you ever tell me? Don't you think I had a right to know?" "Damn it, Mandy," I said sharply. "How could you not know? I beamed whenever you were around. Besides, you seem to have your whole life planned out and never mentioned places for me or us. And the way you talked about it, it seemed like it was something that would make you happy. When you love someone, you want them to be happy. Watching you go to the monastery almost killed me. But I wanted you to do what was best for you. To hell with everyone else, including me." She didn't say anything for a long time, and I realized that perhaps my language was a little rough. "Sorry for the language, sister," I said. "Liam, I'm not a sister anymore," she said. "What are you doing?" I asked. "Shut your mouth, Liam. I need to ask you a question," she said. "No, I don't want to donate to the church at the moment," I said. "Ropes, idiot," she said. "Do you still want to be involved with me?" "More than anything else," I said. "Mandy came to Chicago to be with me, and we never looked back. It didn't take us long to become comfortable with each other, and we knew we were meant to be together. We never talked about our past, so there was no need to lie to each other. She implied that she had seen some things in the church that she did not like and was not proud of. She didn't go into detail, and I didn't ask. I also did not tell her about all the events of my divorce, except for the reasons for this. She didn't ask, so I didn't have to lie. We got married less than 6 months after getting back together. We didn't return home because there was no reason until that moment. Are you listening to me? The words brought me out of my memories. Bert sat down in front of me and said something. "Sorry, Bert," I said. "It's a long way. I must have been dreaming." "I was just wondering about something," he whispered quietly. He looked around to make sure no one was listening. "What are you talking about, Bert?" I asked, looking at my watch. "Why am I still alive?" he asked. "Don't look so stupid. It took me a long time to understand this too. I know it was you. It's all you. I've thought of many theories over the years. I thought about karma. I thought about the losing streak. I thought about justice and realized that none of them were suitable. You ruined Jeff's marriage. You set fire to his clinic. He stopped and read the shock on my face. I won't tell anyone, so stop acting shocked, he said. Besides, except you and me, everyone is dead. You sent Jeff to prison and ruined his career. For someone as arrogant as Jeff, this was a death sentence. It wasn't quick and easy like Greg's death. Jeff's death was long, painful, and drawn out. Greg is dead, I said. I did not hear. He allegedly shot himself in the head in a cheap house on the bad side of town in Detroit, Bert said. But I find it hard to believe. He left a signed suicide letter, drank himself into oblivion, and shot himself in the head. His fingerprints were the only ones on the gun or in that location. Tina confirmed his signature. I watched the video, and although no one is visible, I think Greg was talking to someone, and I think that someone was you. Detroit is a shithole, I said. Why should I go there? Even those who live there don't want to be there. Anyway, my question is, why am I still alive? He asked. You took my golf away. I can't even swing a club. You took my manhood away from me. Without it, I lost Elaine. Everyone knows that she didn't leave because of cheating. I met her a couple of years ago. I could tell that deep down she still loved me more than the guy she married, but she loves her children more than any of us. It's the math of love, Liam. The sum of me and her is greater than the sum of him and her. But the sum of me and her is less than the sum of him, her, and their children. So what you really did was take Elaine and me away. I was too broke and depressed to teach children, so I was transferred to a janitor job. So you took away my career, and I'm slowly dying. Why the hell am I still alive, Liam? Are you that cruel? Why did you do this to your best friends over a woman who was never yours? This bitch was public property. She was never yours. Bert, you give me too much importance, I said. I'm a weakling. I didn't do any of the things you're thanking me for. When I found out that my best friends were sleeping with my wife, I just ran away. I left to start over. And as far as Julia was concerned as public property, when I put the ring on her finger, she was mine. He looked at me as if I didn't care about him. I researched it, Liam. You may not have done it yourself, but I know how you did it. You went to the Monkey Ranch bar in the next town. You talked to the bartender, who gave you the name of the man who beat me up for a price. This man was wearing a mask, and even the person who hired him did not know who he was. All it cost you to ruin my life was $1,500. The man claimed that he was hired by the brother of the woman I slept with, but that didn't add up. At first, I thought it was that new young secretary at school. After all, I met her brother, and he didn't like me. But it took me a while to realize that no one knew I slept with her, especially not her brother. She was involved with a guy who eventually married her. He was her brother's friend, so if her brother knew, she would be in trouble. She would never tell her brother, and neither would I. That left only 2 other women I had slept with, and one of them was my wife. Julia's brothers are all serving overseas in the military, so I thought about it. Who would be upset that I slept with Julia? Then, when a streak of bad luck struck everyone in our circle except you, I realized that I had found my person. Wow, I said. All you need is a damn cape and you can be Columbo. I didn't do any of this. But it was an interesting story. What happened to you all was terrible. It was terrible and tragic, but it was just a streak of bad luck. Maybe this streak of bad luck was a manifestation of your guilt for what you did to me. And you only have luck, right? He said. You were just lucky. You got a better job with an even bigger salary in a bigger city. You married the most beautiful girl in our city, and she loves you madly. She gave up God for you, right? Liam, luck and guilt have a way of balancing out over time, and you have to have your share of bad luck. Only in the movies, Columbo, I said. Well, it's time for me to go. It was nice to see you again, Bert. Maybe next time I'm in town we'll go dancing or play golf. I got up and left the table. When I left the table, Julia was standing in front of me. Liam, I just wanted you to know how much I'm sorry, she said. My heart broke when I saw you getting out of the car. Amanda is still beautiful and your little girl is adorable. It hurt me greatly because she could have been ours. I think I ruined my chance at happiness, but what I wish most was that I had given you and me a fair chance from the start. If there is ever anything I can do for you to try to make up for this, all you have to do is ask. I know you're married again and all, but I'll do anything to make up for it. I hugged her. I forgive you, Julia, I said. Maybe it's time for all of us to put this behind us. I turned around and slowly walked into the parking lot. I waved to Bert, who was still sitting at the table muttering something under his breath. I probably should have been more careful. Before I got to my car, I was giggling inside at Bert. He got what he deserved. Fuck it. Someone grabbed me and threw me to the ground. The sound of gunfire attracted people to the parking lot. When the policeman arrived, he immediately called an ambulance. I had scratches and bruises. Julia had a concussion and was between life and death for some time. Amanda and I were with her at the hospital the entire time. When she was discharged, she stayed with us in Chicago until she fully recovered. By then, my daughter called her Aunt Julia. Although we will never love each other again, I believe that Julia and I are now friends. She met a man who works at the hospital, and although he is much older than us, he loves her. It turns out that the man who tried to kill me and almost killed Julia was hired to do the job. Facing life in prison without the possibility of parole, he quickly ratted Bert out. Bert received 10 years for murder for hire. He came out 2 weeks later. You probably think it's because of his disability, right? So, less than a month after Jeff's funeral, I was asked to speak at Bert's funeral. It was easy. I was still in the city. Amanda and I were still at the hospital caring for Julia, but I refused. However, I attended the funeral with a smile on my face the entire time. Sometimes bastards just get what they deserve, and Bert really should have stopped before things got worse. Sorry if it wasn't the ending you expected, full of joy and roses, but this is my life, and real life, even fictional real life, doesn't always have a happy ending. On the other hand, for me, it's a really happy ending because it's the end and I'm so damn happy. Everything ended as it should have. Julia hurt me, but I ended up with the woman I always wanted. Subscribe to our channel so that your love doesn't cheat on you, and go ahead and listen to the next story because this story is nothing compared to the next one. If you're under 18, don't even think click to the next one. 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 Click to the next one.